Most people who are religious, and of course in Europe and the United States, we're talking about mainly Christians, Jews, and Muslims, believe in traditional marriage, heterosexuality, and so forth because of their faith. And many people in the West have come to believe that that is bigoted or anti-LGBT, which it's not.
This is Common Sense Generation. Common Sense Generation. Hi guys, this is Common Sense Generation. I'm Kądzielska-Koper, and I have with me Todd Huizinga from Institute of the Freedom of Religion. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you for inviting me.
You're American, and you represent the Institute of the Freedom of Religion, but it seems like US is the place of the most huge freedom of religion and the biggest variety of it all. So, first of all, what do you stand for in this institute?
We promote and protect religious freedom for, as we say, everyone, everywhere, all the time. So we have operated worldwide, and mainly we are now concentrating on the Middle East and Southeast Asia, the United States, and I am the person who works on religious freedom in Europe, who promotes religious freedom in Europe. The main religious freedom issue in both Europe and the United States and Canada is basically that most people who are religious, and of course in Europe and the United States we're talking about mainly Christians, Jews, and Muslims, believe in traditional marriage, heterosexuality, and so forth because of their faith. And many people in the West have come to believe that that is bigoted or anti-LGBT, which it's not. It's simply the fact that because we believe, I'm a Christian, we believe that God has revealed to us a certain way to live out our lives morally, that that is what we must do. And we want to make sure that we protect the religious freedom of people whose morals have become something that many people consider to be antiquated.
The fact is this morality is the heritage of this Judeo-Christian tradition, but it's of course a necessary component of a religious person. But on the other hand, those who even don't identify as religious people can still cherish and take from this rich source of Judeo-Christianity. And this often happens, especially in the Western world, but this is also at stake, usually attacked by all forms of relativism. So tell me, you don't have to convince me, but still tell why Judeo-Christian tradition is actually that much important, and even in our region right now in the Western world.
I believe that the Judeo-Christian tradition, and in terms of actual faith, for the most part, the Christian religion, which was the majority faith in Europe and in the United States, is largely responsible for all of the achievements that we have achieved in the West. I believe it's largely responsible for the respect for human rights, the respect for basic freedoms, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of assembly. And I believe it's responsible just in general for our heritage of democracy and tolerance. Now, why do I believe that? I believe that because we believe in a truth which is objective and authoritative, and to which human beings are subject, and that this truth tells us that we must love God And because God has told us so, to love our neighbors as ourselves, to love others as ourselves, that this is largely the reason that the West, Europe and the United States and Canada, is the area of the world that is the freest, the most prosperous, and hopefully still the most stable. So, if I may go on, what, for example, is the Christian and the Jewish, the Judeo-Christian view of the human being? What is a human being? Well, a human being is an individual, each individual, made in the image of God. Therefore, every individual has equal dignity, equal worth. It doesn't matter in terms of our equal worth, in terms of our bearing of the image of God, whether we are accomplished or not accomplished, whether we're healthy or not healthy, whether we're a man or a woman, whether we're old or young. All human beings are equal in dignity and worth because all human beings have been made in the image of God, on the one hand. On the other hand, all human beings are flawed, as we might put it today. As Christians and Jews would put it, sinful. All human beings are sinful. They're also all limited in their knowledge. We don't know everything. We see things from our own point of view. We tend to use power that we have. It's a strong temptation to use our power to abuse it, to use it for corruption. So, every human being is of ineffable and equal dignity. On the other hand, every human being is sinful, limited, and flawed. And that's why, for example, it is a primary value of Western culture to be tolerant toward others, because I know everybody is equal to me in worth and dignity, no matter whether they agree with me or not. Yeah. On the one hand, and also to realize that I am sinful and limited. So tolerance toward others, humility toward oneself. That, when lived out, and of course we never live it out perfectly, but nevertheless, that when lived out is the fount of a stable society. A society where people get along, a society where there is justice. And on the other hand, it's a society where there is separation of the powers of government and checks and balances of one government entity to checking and balancing another, so that power is distributed and not concentrated in too few hands, which would lead to corruption. So in other words, democracy. This is the view of the human being, the Judeo-Christian view of the human being, which has led to the achievements of Western society.
And this anthropology, as you mentioned, and as you very nicely just told us, requires the fact that we have this dignity, but because we are also sinful and imperfect, it is impossible for us to establish here on earth a so-called paradise. We can live well and nicely, but jumping to paradise here through some sort of very radical political changes or revolution is impossible. And I think this is also the core of a difference in anthropology, which is a main difference between all who share Judeo-Christian view of humanity and those who fall into all forms of utopia, which basically want to reshape the human nature. Because with this image and with what you just described, a human nature in fact is unchangeable because it was created in the image of God, but with this element of sin, and we know about it. And so I think in this case, the vocation or the goal is rather to change yourself and to limit this sinful element in yourself than to change the society and the Western, the rest of the world. And this is again the opposite to what very often we right now hear through different ideologies.
That's exactly how I would say it. So yes, you're absolutely right. From the Judeo-Christian view of the human being comes the rejection of all political utopias. That's why also we want limited government. The job of government is not to make the world perfect. It'll never happen. But rather, the job of government is to secure the unalienable rights of its citizens. And I just think that's incredibly important, because every time there has been an attempt to achieve a political utopia, it's ended in disaster.
Usually it ended up even in more power, more terror, and more bloodshed, because it is an attempt to change the human nature, and it doesn't want to change. And you need even more power, even more terror to bend it, to break it, but it doesn't break to this element. Even the worst gulags, the worst camps, the worst oppression doesn't change the nature of human beings. But the fact is that the Marxist ideology is so strong, then it's reviving. It was proven to be wrong so many times, but it still come back to life all the time. That the youngest new generation or different place of the world want to say, we will do it in the right way. We will do it eventually how it's supposed to look like. But it's never supposed to look like this, and it always ends in a disaster. But still, the attempts are until today. Why do you think so?
I think that that's largely due to the secularization of the West, which maybe a better word for secularization is, since the West was a mainly Christian society, de-Christianization. As fewer and fewer people in the West believe in Christianity, that vacuum of hope that people needs to be filled. And that hope, unfortunately, often gets filled with utopian political schemes. And I think you said it very well about human nature not being able to change, and you have to adapt the political system to human beings. I think another way of kind of characterizing a political utopia is that a political utopia tries to adapt human beings to the political dream. And a politics that has a chance of working is one that adapts the politics to the way human beings are. If you read the Federalist Papers, for example, the American series of essays that was written in order to, during the debate on whether to ratify the US Constitution in the 18th century. It's amazing how the Federalist Papers concentrate on the view of what human beings are, and how can we adapt government, how can we structure our government to the way human beings are in a way that will restrain evil and promote the good.
Understood. But again, well, you're American, and because all changes which happen in America at the end somehow affect the rest of the world because of the American hegemony in the cultural world, but of course in a political way as well. And unfortunately to say so, but you are the source of all of those extreme ideologies right now, especially of young people who lost their identity to this extent that their question, who are they, is no longer a question who I'm supposed to be in a job, in a sphere, what is supposed to be my profession, what are my talents, how I'm supposed to earn my money. But this call is already, what is my sexual ideology, identity, who I am I a human being at all? And this lost huge comes from America. Why so? Where in this country where all the presidents were Protestants except two who were Catholics, where this void is created, where does it come from?
That's a very good question. I can give you one possibility, and that is because the United States, America, was the place where individual freedom was first emphasized to the point that it was. That when the Christian faith that was behind the idea of individual freedom, which arises out of equal human dignity for all, that when the Christian faith that was behind it was lost, then many people tended to absolutize individual freedom. And individual freedom became my right to decide for myself what's true for me. And if you don't agree with me, you're violating my dignity. Therefore, you have to agree with whatever I have decided is true for me. It's reached the point where the only objective truth is my subjective assessment of what is true for me. And that is, you're right, very, very prominent in the United States. However, it's also a very European thing. And I would not agree with the idea that everything comes from the United States. I would say that kind of in the West, we're all in this together. We're all a de-Christianizing Christian civilization. There's been bad and good things from all of us on both sides of the Atlantic. And I think that we really need each other. I mean, I am a true believer in the Transatlantic Alliance and the Transatlantic Partnership. So, yes, a lot of bad things have come from the United States, but a lot of good and bad has come both ways across the Atlantic.
Well, absolutely. The first is that Marxian idea were actually created here. And funny thing is that most of the Chinese people who do think they're communists, they never read Marx. But this is a funny element as well. But scary, and on the other hand, shows us that there is this void, and as Saint Augustine said, that my soul is restless until it rests in God. So without the faith and some form of attachment to God, either through religion or at least through culture, which is always the way of actually looking for God, we are restless. Mm-hmm. And in different forms. And right now, those on the left are even more restless and even more lost. But as you said, that people, this relativism, which goes that the subject is this most important, is on the very radical left. But the American idea of libertarianism, which extends the value of freedom not only as a tool but as an ultimate value, goes the same way, where there are those only few individuals who are superior and the rest is the mob, which is not even worth that much.
Well, I think you're right, but the ironic thing is that the rhetoric is always that everyone's equal and I'm for the downtrodden and I'm for the unjust, I'm for the people who've suffered injustice. But in reality, you're right. Once individual freedom has been elevated to the ultimate ideal, then human beings being the way they are, then it's my individual freedom above everybody else's individual freedom. So, absolutely. But again, I would, it's very much an American and European thing.
Yeah, I don't want to blame all America for all of those things, but definitely, but definitely in the moment when it's very powerful in many forms, and it took this hegemony from the British Empire to the American Empire right now. The changes, also good changes, would happen in US, start to happen in the rest of the world as well. Of course, it should be this balances between the old continent and the new continent, but you are sort of leading the way. Tell me how does look the religious, the people of faith in US? Or is it declining, or is it growing? People are becoming more Catholic or Protestant. Which way does it go?
That's a good question, and I can give you only my personal perspective. I believe that, unfortunately, at the moment, real religion is declining in the United States. I'm a Protestant, but personally, I think when we're talking about these basic interests, these basic phenomena of do we understand and know what human beings are, or do we not? I'm not really that interested in distinguishing, for example, between Catholic and Protestant, because as a Protestant, I can say we're all Christians if we believe in Jesus Christ.
I fully agree. I think this is this huge call, and I myself is actually divide Christians not between Protestants and Catholics, but between those who are awake and those who are still asleep.
That's totally true. I'm a Presbyterian, for example, and I have much more in common with a Catholic who believes in and loves Jesus Christ than I have with a Protestant or Presbyterian whose Protestantism has become something more like political correctness than like religion. But I do believe that in the United States at the moment, real religion is declining. There are fewer and fewer people visiting church regularly, which is a relatively accurate indicator of religious faith. It's not a complete indicator, but it's a relatively accurate indicator. It's also an unfortunate fact that younger people are leaving in much greater numbers, leaving the faith, than older people, which points to a future which could be considerably more secular in the United States. That's one of the phenomena that shows that religion is probably declining. It's too difficult to say for sure, but probably declining in the United States right now. Another very important phenomenon, however, is that many American evangelical Protestants and American, should I say, evangelical Catholics, in other words, Christians who go to churches that believe in the faith.
Exactly.
More and more of them actually don't really understand the faith, don't really know the faith that well, and go there because it's a social thing, or because it's nice, or because of various things, but they haven't taken the time to understand the ancient truths of the faith. And I think this is a phenomenon that happens everywhere in the world, that very often cultural values of a particular place tend to overtake the religious faith. You know, in America, Christianity is largely Americanized. And it's largely kind of, this makes me feel good, and therefore I go to church, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's not just America where this happens, it happens everywhere, but unfortunately it is happening in the United States. So 2 reasons that it's declining. 1, church attendance, period, and belief, and the other, kind of a poor understanding on the part of Christians of what Christianity really is.
I think that what you just said is very true as well about the Catholic Church, which become institutionalized to that extent that very often it totally forgot this human part, but also it is so conservative, but in a bad manner, that it forgets sort of the works of Holy Spirit, and it becomes just dead. But I recently had been on a mass in Rome, and then you realize that you are in a museum, and you're so separate from others believer next to you, but also those who are there upstairs. You take part just in the theatrical show. But it goes down, and I think Pope Benedict wrote a lot about it, that the real faith in Christianity goes to be back in the small communities, and not in the big institutes, but which tend to be difficult. But on the other hand, there are two phenomenons in altogether Christianity, which is brought, one, I think, by Australian church, Hillsong, and their gospel, which moves hearts of all the Christians, not only Protestants, but Catholics as well, and is translated to so many languages, and they do those concerts all over the world, and they are expanding, but also just sharing this beautiful faith in the words of songs. And the other thing, I'm not sure if you agree with me, but a TV series called The Chosen.
Say it again?
The TV series called The Chosen, which is a funny work of three. A Protestant pastor as a director, Jenkins, the Jonathan Rumi as a Jesus Christ who is Catholic, and a rabbi, but a rabbi, I forgot how I know their names, but Christian rabbi, or those who Messianic rabbi, Messianic Christian, Messianic rabbi.
Yes.
So Jew who respects all the Jewish traditions, but all the other except Jesus. Three of them work on the series, and it is of course criticized by everyone. But on the other hand, it has a harvest that I don't think it's been shown for a lot of time. Like, young people are going everywhere, meeting all over the Western world, meeting together, sometimes wearing the robes like teenagers, and watching The Chosen.
That's wonderful. I did not know that, I must admit. I have seen a few episodes of The Chosen, and I've liked them. So in that sense, I don't know as much as you do about it, but I agree with you from what I know.
I myself was actually very much moved through, especially the biblical scenes in The Chosen. And I remember the moment when at the meeting of Jesus with the Samaritan woman next to the well. And maybe it strikes you because very often we hear the phrases of gospel and Bible in our native languages, and this time I heard it in English, and in other language it strikes you differently, because then you hear the meaning, the real meaning. But it was something, at least for me, a call of this unity of Christianity, because the Samaritan woman is asking Jesus, our forefathers have worshipped here on this mountain, and this is the well of Jacob, and you Jews are worshiping there in Jerusalem, where we Samaritans cannot enter. Where God wants us to worship? And he of course says that it will be time. In fact, it is right now when it doesn't matter where, but in truth and spirit. Spirit and truth.
Well, so that gives me, thank you for that. That gives me an opportunity to say, that all of the things, or many of the things that are being exaggerated right now by post-Christian progressivism and absolutized, like, for example, the idea of social justice and things like that, they come from Christianity. Christianity has always been, again, about the dignity of every human being equal, and about justice, and about the equality of women. Jesus talked to a woman in Samaria. That was an amazing thing. He wasn't supposed to talk to a woman, and he wasn't supposed to talk to a Samaritan, because they were considered inferior.
An unmarried woman living with a man who was not her husband.
Exactly.
And with a dispute reputation, that's why she was coming to the well in the middle of the day.
Yes.
And of course, he wanted to meet with her there. So all of those actually made him a rebel. to such extent that we wouldn't, a lot of people, I would say, in very, like this death part of the church wouldn't accept at all.
Yes.
And this is a scary thing, but I'm happy we have this opportunity and this conversation. It seems like the living Christians are still there out in the world. So thank you very, very much for all of this. And Todd, this was a great opportunity, and thank you for being here on Common Sense Generation. And I do hope that you, the viewers of our show, you liked it, and that you will think about what was said here, because this looking at least of what is the Judeo-Christian values is extremely important, and we shouldn't forget it, even if we are not true believers. And I also want to thank Polish National Foundation for making this video podcast possible. This is Common Sense Generation. Common Sense Generation.